and some of these things. So I'm going to focus on how do we estimate the time period of Rama's journey. Rama's journey is Ramayana, right? So that's what we're doing over here. And I deliberately chose the title as estimating because we can't be so arrogant as to try to say, I know the date. It simply is not possible. And I hope the result of my talk will more or less, I gave away the punchline, so you'll understand that's where we're going towards. Very, very quickly, this is who we are, Indian History Awareness and Research. We are a group of people who are based in Coimbatore, Houston, Singapore, and so on. Subrata Gangopadhyay is our president. And you can see some of our past works on the iHeart channel on YouTube. What we do is we research Indian history with Indic lens, and we create awareness with the research that we do. We go and talk in forums like this on what we do. We write articles in magazines, social media, we write articles for conferences, journals, we review textbooks, and we have public events and talks on stage. So today, the first thing, if we do any kind of a scientific work, is to pose the problem. What is the problem that we are doing? Are we estimating the date of Valmiki Ramayana? Is that what we are doing? Because that's what a leftist scholar might do. Because they look at the content over there, the period of the Sanskrit in there, and try to say this is the date, this is what is wrong. Or are we dating Valmiki Ramayana or estimating the date of events in the Valmiki Ramayana? So that's what we are after over here. We're trying to estimate the date of events in Valmiki Ramayana. So all of us know the story of Ramayana. From Balakanda onwards, Rama's first 16 years, he helps Rishi Vishwamitra and he marries Sita. We know that. Then onward to Ayodhya Kanda. This is a disputable figure that after 12 years of married life, Dasharatha desires to crown Rama, and Rama goes to exile for 14 years. This picture shows Guha, the king of the Nishadas, who helped Rama to cross and his companions to cross the river. From there on, we know the next book is Archaeo-Astronomy, where it has 13 years of forest life. And in the 14th year, Sita got abducted. That was their encounter with Rakshasas. And this picture shows Ravana fighting Jatayu as he carries away the kidnapped Sita. From there on, the next book, Kishkinda Kanda, where he meets the Vanaras, Sugriva and Hanuman, and he learns that Sita is located in Sri Lanka through the search parties and so on. And here's a relief from a temple in Cambodia. I put this over here to show the extent of Ramayana is not just the Indian land, but even up to Cambodia and other places, there is cultural consciousness of Ramayana. In Sundara Kanda, Hanuman leaps to Lanka and the stories of his exploits over there. He meets Sita and he returns with the joyous news back to Kishkinda that he has located Sita. And if you look carefully, you see Hanuman sitting on the tree over here. And Ravana's meeting Sita at Ashokamana, and Hanuman's on the tree. Then we have the book Yuga Kanda, where they talk about the construction of Ramasetu, the war itself, the rescue of Sita, return to Ayodhya, then the unfortunate Agni Pariksha, and the Ram Rajya, which follows on. And this painting is unique because it's done by somebody called Sahiddin, a Muslim, and so you see some elements of Islamic painting styles also over here. Then we have Uttarakanda, during which there was a separation from Sita. Sita goes on to live in the hermitage of Valmiki and the birth of Lavakusha. And then Valmiki composes Ramayana and teaches it to the twins, and they sing it at Rama's court. That's when Rama gets to know about what's going on. Finally, Sita is engulfed by the birth. So this is the story that we have of Rama as in the Valmiki Ramayana. And that is what we are now after. We are going inside the contents over here and trying to say what kind of tools can I apply to, if I may use the word rationally, can I rationally date these things, and what are the tools that I can apply for these things. So here is the outline. At age 16, marries Sita. 12 years after marriage, he wants to crown, Dasharatha wants to crown Rama at the age of 28 years. He goes to exile for 14 years. Returns to Ayodhya, 42 years, and remaining life referred to as Rama Rajya. And here's a relief of Ramayana that is shown in Angkor Wat in Kampuchea around 1100 CE. I'll jump there. So the very first thing that I do is I will talk about the contemporary dating of Ramayana. And by contemporary dating, I mean the date that you will encounter if you were to read a textbook or talk to scholars in the area, not traditional scholars, but scholars who are in academia and so on. I talk about what is the basis for the date they apply and what kind of critical analysis can be applied. Cutting the story short, the date of Ramayana is put to 500 to 100 BCE. by most of the academic scholars. And the reason for that is this gentleman over here is H.T. Sankalia, who was born in 1908 and died in 1989. He was a very famous archaeologist in India. So his intention was to look at archaeological artifacts and say where is the evidence for Ramayana. And most of his prime was in 1970s. So around 1970s, most of the archaeological digs had only shown a certain extent of archaeological artifacts in northern India. So he tried to use his knowledge of the Ramayana and excavation. He said that Ramayana shows deep knowledge of the Mahajanapada kingdoms, republics and kingdoms. And he also compared it with Indo-Greek customs. He said 500 BC to 100 BC is a time of contact with the Greeks and the Greek kingdoms in India. And he looked for evidence of customs that are there in the Greeks and that are also there in India, therefore trying to establish an equivalence between those two. And then the excavations that he did itself. Based on all of these things, he wrote a key article, How Old is the Ramayana in Times of India? That was the seminal paper over here, upheld by leftists. Here is the research paper after that in Social Scientist in 1976. Even the choice of words that I used, myth, reveals biases. So there are already entered a very biased way. So my critique is going to be based on questioning the analysis and the fact that it ignores much evidence. So you can get to a conclusion by saying other evidence does not exist. So that is one of the mechanisms they use. I'll also show that his methods are outdated, and that's why we need to try and come to new ways. I'm not going to read all of these things. Here's a book review of the book that this gentleman wrote. It is called The Ramayana in Historical Perspective by Sankalia in 1982. And this is a review by Cambridge University, a professor called J.L. Brockington. And he recognizes his expertise as an archaeologist, and he expected him to contribute significantly to Ramayana studies. But his professor also says his study is vitiated by his naive approach to textual matters, meaning that he has completely ignored the text of Ramayana and tried to base his thesis on other things. So the choice of words is important. His book review says a naive approach to textual matters. Then he goes on and says Rama's token for Sita was a signet ring that he gives to Hanuman, and says that when you see Sita, show her this ring and she knows who I am. And he says this custom first arose in the Indo-Greek group, and therefore he says that this is in that time frame. They borrowed this idea, the composers of that. Elsewhere he remarks the implications for dating based on Balakanda, of Sakas, of Yavanas, Pallavas, and so on. And he also says Sita offering to Kalindi of 100 pots of wine is connected with the import of wine from Romans, and says that again the connection with the Roman Empire over here. His aspersions on Vaidya's motives exclusion from the text are totally unjustified. Other suggestions of Greek or Roman influence have less substance. There is no substance in what he's saying. And also, he uses very derogatively that Pushpaka Vimana was the first jumbo jet, because the Pushpaka Vimana had a Gajalakshmi symbol in it. So he says that is the first jumbo jet. So the bottom line is, in inverted quotes, he says Ramayana in its present state cannot be earlier than the 5th century AD, yet just what he means by this is not clear. He says it's not clear because he says throughout he seems to accept the growth of the concept of Ramayana, but he's presented it as basically a unitary work that means written at just one point in time. So bottom line is professor using euphemisms, he's totally toned down research, saying this guy's rubbish over here.
Yes, I just wanted incidentally to add this point, that these Vimanas which were there in Ramayana are Devata Siddhis. They are not the Bhautika Vimanas or the physical plane which you have here right now, or physical aircraft. They are Siddhis, and it is a Devata itself which has got that Siddhi. If you appeal to the Devata, it will act as a Vimana for you. So this is a very important difference. But it expects a lot of cleanliness from you. Unlike these Vimanas which we can go in any condition, you can't go into that exact Vimana, whichever condition you like.
So we have to be careful that these guys are all Indic perspective. Indic is from the outside. They don't recognize the sacred. They don't recognize the textual authority. So they just go and apply their lenses to it. That's the reason why we see all of these things. And our job over here is to critique these things and see what are the lenses these guys are using. Is it valid? So the next major thing is linguistic analysis, and all of us are familiar with this. A lot of people, scholars have applied linguistic analysis in the Sanskrit used. And here's an example, T. Michelson, 1904. He takes strange words, not so common words in Ramayana, several groups. Are they found in Samhitas? Are they found in epic Sanskrit? Are they found in the Brahmanas? Are they found in Upanishads? And so on. He makes a categorization. Then once he categorizes that, he says, based on the language, I can place it somewhere over here. And then he goes and asks somebody else, do you know what is the date for this Upanishad? What is the date for that Samhita? And based on that, he says, this is the time period. That's how linguistics work. And all of us know that almost everybody, such analysis helps upper and lower bounding of dates. To those of other known texts, usually Max-Muller dates are used. That's what we use. so we know where this analysis generally leads. And here is a journal article by the gentleman. So the rebuttal for this one that I have is, the archaeological evidence available for cities mentioned in Ramayana date only up to 500 BCE in the 1970s period. There is no archaeological evidence prior to that. Inability to uncover archaeological evidence is not evidence of absence. Just because you have not found something doesn't mean it does not exist, right? It is just that you have not been able to uncover it with the tools that you have. So 1970, the tools they had, they were not able to do it. We know that these excavations all over Sindhu-Saraswati region have revealed very ancient settlements up to Bihar with a range of dates up to 9500 BCE. That we know in the 2000s, right? 2015, 17, we know these things are going on. So we know that earlier work is outdated and by the current research we are doing. Linguistic evidence only provides relative dating for a written record related to other texts. When did you write it down? When all texts, Vedas and Puranas are clustered arbitrarily to the dates suggested by Max Muller, there is not much confidence in the dates fixed to such absolutes. Max Muller's dating is not an absolute. You can say relative to other texts, when was it written down? Not the oral transmission, when was it written down? There is a questionable equation with Greek contact from 300 to 100 BCE. And finally, the criticism is that it fails to examine much internal evidence. Hence, it is guilty of suppression and distortion of facts. So this is the kind of scholarship that is there in the textbooks. If your children studying social studies textbooks, date of Ramayana is 300 BCE, you know where it is coming from. They have completely ignored the evidence that exists. It's only by falsifying and suppression of evidence they're able to come up with such a date. So here I've shown two lines. Throughout the talk I'll show these lines. There's an upper bound on the date, there's a lower bound on the date. According to the leftist, 100 BCE. It cannot be earlier than that. So 100 BCE. Here's a rebuttal. This is a map from Jijit Ravi and Northern Indian geography in Ramayana. I'm sorry I couldn't get a higher resolution map over here. But what Jijit Ravi did is that he showed in the map of India all the places known in the geography of the epics. Just from the epics, what are the places mentioned, he put it in the map. And you can see a very, very wide distribution of knowledge in northern India, as well as in southern India. This is the journey of Rama, by the way. If you go to the previous one, this blue line shows in Ayodhya onwards, where did he travel to the various places and so on, till over here. And you see that there is significant knowledge of Indian geography. So the geography of India is basically burnt into the epics, you say that. It's got complete knowledge of that. So the assertion that the Ramayana only seems to be topical to northern India is a wrong assertion by the leftists. That's the bottom line from this. Then if you look at the archaeological sites from 7000 to 3000 BCE in India, what we see is all over northern India you've got Saraswati, Indus, the Ganga plain settlements. And these are known from today's evidence, right? It was not available when this gentleman was doing his archaeology in 1970s. It was not very well known. But today we know that his assertion that it cannot be older than 500 BC because I didn't find any artifacts in Ayodhya is wrong. Because today we know that even in a place like in Bihar, we are finding artifacts about 8,000 years old, 9,000 years old and so on. So the civilization very much existed. So even that other assertion by him is wrong. So here we are. We have examined the scholarly date for Ramayana and we have critiqued it. The scholarly date is 500 to 100 BCE. We have critiqued it saying there's a problem with this. So we are going to the second round of evidence that we have. The evidence is traditional dates. When you go to a traditional scholar, what is he going to say for the date of Ramayana and how can we critique it? So here I'm going to use words like emic and etic. Emic means the internal voice, people who's from that culture. Indic means somebody from the outside of the culture looking inside and not having the benefit of your lens. The traditional period of the Ramayana, so from the authority of the Vayu Purana, which is one of the oldest Puranas, which is conservatively dated to 350 BCE, Vayu Purana states Dasharatha's son was born in the 24th Treta Yuga of the current month, which is the 7th Manavatar. And the Vayu Purana basically contains a lot of verses on cosmology, solar, lunar dynasties, and so on. A lot of information over there. And the key phrase for us to understand is born the 24th Treta Yuga of the current month. So we are now going to deconstruct these words. What do these words mean? What does Treta Yuga mean? And so on and so forth. Definition of Yuga. So there are several definitions of Yuga, but now I choose to give a certain approach over here. These are Hindu markers of epoch or the passage of time. In a Yuga cycle, there are 4 Yugas called Chatur-Yuga. The Satya or the Krita, the Treta, Dwapara, and the Kali. They follow a 4:3:2:1 ratio for duration.
So the previous one, is it Vaivasvat Manvantara? Which Manvantara?
I'm only now going by the textual thing. Says the 24th Treta Yuga of the current one.
The current Manvantara is Vaivasvat.
Yes. Yes. The 7th one. The seventh Manvantara. So here, if you look at the Yugas, we start with one where you're at 100% virtue, and you're in descending Satya Yuga. From there, we're descending Treta Yuga, descending Dwapara Yuga, descending Kali Yuga. And when Kali Yuga ends at 0% virtue, and from there you go to ascending Kali Yuga, ascending Dwapara, ascending Treta, ascending Satya Yuga to 100% virtue. So this is our Indian thought. This is how cycles of time start and end. Now we are now going to try and impose some absolutes on this and see can we do that. So there are 2 models of time for Yuga. That is a little unfortunate for us. There isn't one model. There are 2 models. The first model is from Manava Dharma Shastra, Manusmriti, from these verses. It says the years in the Yuga are 4,800 plus 3,600 plus 2,400 plus 1,200, which adds up to 12,000 years. So in the descending cycle of the Yugas, 12,000 years. In the ascending cycle of Yugas, another 12,000 years. So you add it up, it comes to 24,000 years. 24,000 is very, very close to something called precession of equinox. I'll talk to you later on about that. Precession of equinox, very interesting concept. So whoever wrote that seemed to think of a Mahayuga. It's not a Mahayuga. It's a full cycle, 2 full cycles over there, linked with 1 full precession. Whoever wrote that seems to think. However, Srimad Bhagavatam in this line, in this 3.11.19, says 1 divine year is equal to 360 human years. So if you use that definition and multiply all of this by 360, then you get this figure, these figures for the years according to Srimad Bhagavatam, which adds up to 4.32 million years. That's the definition of Yuga as far as Srimad Bhagavatam is concerned.
Then 1 Chatur-Yuga. 1
Chatur-Yuga.
Yes, 12,000 years, is it 1 Deva?
No, Manusmriti does not say that very, very clearly.
Because 12,000 years is 1 Deva, 1
human.
Yeah, not.
No.
Sorry, divine.
Yes,
divine.
And if you work with that, you will get the same 4 like
Yes,
that.
absolutely. So this factor of 360 sitting over there that has caused a lot of confusion, especially if you go to the works of leftists who have conflated one over the other and caused a lot of confusion in the Yuga cycle and so on. So here is the verse. I'm not going to this verse itself. It's from Prabhupada books, and it says over here that 1 year of demigods is equal to 360 years of human beings. So if you look at Yugas and larger cycles of time, the duration of Chatur Yuga, 1 cycle is equal to 4.32 million years. And here comes your question itself. Now, each Manu's lifetime itself spans 71 Chatur Yugas. Each Manu, 71 Chatur Yugas. Each Kalpa has got 14 Manus, and we are down to 7th Manu. So Brahma's day is 1 Kalpa is therefore 4.32 billion years. That's according to our understanding of time. That's what it is. So 1 Brahma's day plus night is 1 Pralaya, which is around 8.64 billion years. So once again, let's place things in context. According to Vayu Purana, Rama was born in the 24th Treta Yuga of current Manu, which is the 7th Manvantara. Again, placing things in context. What we did is we took a traditional date, we are now deconstructing the traditional date to try and make sense to fix it to our time and say, can we get a time basis on dating? That's what we are doing now. So to do that, we try to understand what is the Yuga, two models of Yuga, these are the times indicated, and so on. So here is a Hindu cycle of time. All of us know that. Here is the Yuga, Satya Yuga, Treta, Dwapara, Kali, and Chatur Yuga. So Mahayuga, 71 Mahayugas for one Manu, 14 Manus make one Kalpa. That is one day of Brahma and one night of Brahma. This is one Pralaya. We know that each Brahma lives for 100 such Brahma years. So every day and night there is a creation distribution happening, and we also know we are in the 51st year of the current Brahma. Now, if you say,
can you go back to 1 second?
Yes. If you now ask a question, does only our traditional literature talk about Yugas? Where else in the Indian consciousness have we talked about Yugas? We can certainly look at our recent scientists. By recent, I mean Aryabhatta. So, Aryabhatta refers to Yugas. In his very first verse in Aryabhatta, he says in a Yuga, the revolutions of the sun are 4.32 million. See that once again? He's referring to the Chatur Yuga over here. Of the moon, so much of the earth. If you divide this figure of the earth by this one, you'll get 365. So he's encoded his knowledge of solar years and everything, Aryabhatta, whenever he wrote this Aryabhatta, right? Not only that, even if you go to Surya Siddhanta, which is another very scholarly work from ancient India, which has gone through many revisions. But the oldest Surya Siddhanta we know is exceedingly ancient. There are newer revisions, that also we know. But here also it talks in verse 15 and 16, the time containing 12,000 years of the god is called Chatur Yuga. These include their Sandhya also, and they contain 4.32 million solar years. And it goes on to talk about the ratio also. Surya Siddhanta talks about ratio 4:3:2:1. That is how we know all these things. If you ask, how do we know all these things? It's because it is taught in various texts. We have these definitions of these yugas. So let me go from there on to my critique of this one. So what do we have? We now have the traditional methods defined. We have the traditional methods, two Yuga models. How do we make sense out of it? What are we going to say is the time of Ramayana, based upon the traditional dating methods. We have two models for Yugas. It is not clear which anchor point to use to back and post-date Yugas. Yugas only talk about periods of time. When did it start? In relation to our current time, when did it start? That's the anchor point we want, and we don't have that anchor point. Of course, we know one traditional use of 3002 BC for the start of Kali Yuga. For the last, since Aryabhatta's time at least, people have been saying Kali Yuga started in February 18th, 3102 BCE. All of us have been saying it. But there are problems even with that date. At this talk, I'm not going to go into that, but there are some problems even with that date. So if we use that as a start of Kali Yuga and back calculate and post calculate, that means right now we are in the ascending Dwapara Yuga. Remember, there's a descending Kali Yuga and then the ascending Kali Yuga, ascending Dwapara. That means in that model, we are the ascending Dwapara using the first model. Or we are still in the descending Kali Yuga if we go to the second model. So there's uncertainty right over there. So attempting to compute a date for Ramayana in relation to our current calendar by using Yuga definition is not yet conclusive. That's the bottom line. I think there's a lot of work still needed by scholars to try and get more clues and try to figure out what is going on. I have chosen to take the Treta Yuga as an upper bound. As you can see, I say the upper bound, put it as a Treta Yuga, take the definition of Srimad Bhagavatam that talks about millions of years for Treta Yuga. Let's go with it. We don't know how we can define it. Our goal now is to refine this lower bound and see where can we take this. So what have I done so far? So far, I talked about our academic literature and said how do they date Ramayana, 100 BC. Then I went to traditional account, said in our tradition, when do we date Ramayana? We said Treta Yuga, and we said it's difficult now to figure out in relation to our current time, when did Ramayana happen? Now I'm going to the third way of looking at it. The third way of looking at it is to look for citations to Ramayana in our ancient Indic text. If there is an Indic text that talks about Ramayana, that means it tells me immediately that Ramayana should have been before that text, right? That's ideal. That is ideal. So by looking at citations, we get a progressively defined lower bound on date of Ramayana. So for this, I refer to the works by Dr. P.B. Vartak, and he's given a lot of information. For example, this gentleman who lived in 300 BCE, who was a playwright, he talked about Ramayana. That means Ramayana is at least 300 BC because at this time in Yuga. Then Bhasha is a very famous Sanskrit playwright, and he lived conventionally dating around 500 BCE, and these are the plays that he wrote. These plays are based on Ramayana. So we know that Ramayana is at least 500 BC. Okay? So there we go. Shudraka in Brachakatika, we know that he refers to Ramayana, so it's around 500 BC, once again based on the leftist mechanism of taking these guys to Buddhist period. Then there is a Karma Pradipa or Katyana Smriti that is dated to 600 BCE that talks about Ramayana. There is a Shukra Niti in 1000 BCE that talks about Ramayana also. Panini, who Vartak dates to 1160 BCE, talks about Ramayana. Why does he date it to this period? Because Panini refers to Dhanishta Nakshatra and the winter solstice. When I talk about Archaeo-Astronomy, I'm talking about why that's relevant. That means clearly, according to Vartak, Panini did not live according to 200 BCE by leftist Plaism, but he lived in 1100 BCE according to the astronomical phenomena which he witnessed. He witnessed that phenomenon. So he refers to Ramayana, that means Ramayana is at least 1160 BC. Garga Samhita in 1650 talks of BC talks about Ramayana. Finally, Vishnu Purana 1652 BC talks about Ramayana. So by looking at these citations, we now are able to critically say date of Ramayana. Let's pull it from the lower bound, it's leftist, pull it to 100 BCE, pull it all the way to 500 BC, all the way to 1652 BC. That's our method. That's what we're using over here. Next, Vartak also talks about citations of Ramayana from the Mahabharata. Mahabharata has got a lot of references to Ramayana, whereas Ramayana does not have any reference to Mahabharata. Okay? So he says that, here's an example. Krishna says in Gita, I am Rama. When he's trying to, Vishwarupa is trying to say all who he is, what he is, and all this kind of thing. Then there is a word Ramayana used by Bhima in this particular verse of Mahabharata, this particular chapter, that appears from his talk with Maruti Hanuman, that Bhima had studied the Ramayana carefully. Because he is able to discourse with Maruti, that means he had already studied Ramayana very, very carefully. In the Shanti Parva, it includes a story of 16 kings told by Krishna while consoling Yudhishthira. Here, Rama's story with exile in the forest for 14 years is true. So when Yudhishthira is unhappy that he is going to exile other things, Krishna comes to him saying, even Rama had to do it. Then finally, in the Drona Parva, there is the description from Bhima lifted an elephant and stood like Hanuman. So again, I just chose some references. There are many, many. If you read Vartak's book, he gives a complete 2-3 chapters worth of citations to Mahabharata. Amazing citations. So what does this do? This allows us to refine the lower bound from 1652 BCE to what I call in inverted quotes the period of the Mahabharata. And this intentionally why I did that. Because even the dating of the Mahabharata is not conclusive. So there are scholars who say different dates of Mahabharata. The traditional scholars would say something, the leftist scholars would say something, Archaeo-Astronomers would say something. So there are several dates over there. So I will just enigmatically put it down as the period of Mahabharata. There are citations to Ramayana also in the Upanishads and Vedas. So for example, if you were to take Sita Upanishad, which is attached to Atharva Veda, obviously about Sita, completely about Sita. And then there is Rama Rahasya Upanishad attached to Atharva Veda. How are these Vedas treated, these Upanishads treated by conventional scholars? Conventional scholars use the last known revision of these things, which is in Telugu literature, to about 16th century and 15th century, and say that this is only 15th century period. This is not is a new Upanishad, not an old Upanishad. But then the traditional scholar has got a lot more to say about it, and the contents based on it is much more ancient than that. These are attached to Atharva Veda, and an earlier talk that I gave at India House on Indian medical systems, I had a chance to date when would the Atharva Veda might have happened. That would be written at least. So we proposed a date at least 3000 BC. At least, it's not the date, at least 3000 BC. So these are pretty ancient over here. Then Atharva Veda itself talks about Ramayana, and this is a reference that I have for that in 10.2.31. The Taittiriya Brahmana also refers to Valmiki. The Taittiriya Aranyaka in this reference talks about Mahabharata. Then finally, Rig Veda. Rig Veda has got two references to Ramayana. Of course, people would dispute these things based on questionable translations and so on, but the point is there are scholars willing to devote their attention and explain why it refers to that. These are the verses that I put over here. These two verses in Rig Veda refer to Ramayana. So the Atharva Veda is at least 3000 BCE. Taittiriya Brahmana, Vartak puts it to 4560 BCE. I think that's the time frames that come out of these things. So now I come to a discussion on the citations. What have we done? Again, recapping, academics. From academics, we went on to traditional literature, then citations, and we are in citations. So in citations, clearly from Sanskrit playwright times onwards to the period of Mahabharata, there have been numerous references to Ramayana. There have been references also in Upanishads and Vedas. For now, let us fix the Mahabharata to 5500 BCE. This is a date proposed by Nilesh Nilkanth as well as Dr. P.V. Vartak. And let's ignore Taittiriya Samhita, which is 8350 BC. Let's ignore Rig Veda also for now, because we have not done anything for dating. We'll say it's disputed, we're not going to accept it, it's dispute out there. That means our date for Ramayana now has got refined from 100 BCE all the way to 5500 BCE at least, based upon the citations in our own Indic text that talk about these things. By the way, this is all evidence that is ignored in academic literature. When academicians try to date the Ramayana, they don't go to any of these kind of citations, but this is a scientific way of doing things. In science, it's always a question of citation. Who cited whom? And when is that citation? Is that a valid citation? When can I date that citation? This is a very logical way of doing things. So here are the dates based on citations. Having said that, I will next go to the next section on Archaeo-Astronomy, because Archaeo-Astronomy has got great potential for helping us out with the dating of events. So I'll give a very brief introduction to this because I've been talking about this in the past also, and there's a lot of material over here in Mahabharata time's running out. So what is Archaeo-Astronomy? Astronomical references and oral written records are like archaeological artifacts found in the field. Archaeologists go to the field, they dig up, they get an artifact, they'll say this is the date for this period and so on. Archaeo-astronomers will go to the text that talks about astronomical references, and that is the data point. They'll use those data points and try to make sense out of ancient measurements and construct a prehistory. So we can think of the celestial clock. Today we got wristwatch, we have got atomic clocks, we got all kinds of clocks that tells about night, day, and all those kind of things. But it pays because the Indian context, we have always looked at the skies as a markers of time. We are a civilization that talks about epochs that goes into billions of years. And we are able to do that by looking at motion of stars and other such things. So we once again go to the celestial clock and realize there are a lot of phenomena out there. A sunrise and sunset happens every day. It's not much interest, right? If they say that something happened at sunrise, you would say, with sunrise, the sunrise every day. Then there's a full moon and new moon every 27.55 days. That's also not of much interest. If I tell you that he was born during a full moon, you'll say, which full moon? It happens every 27 days. So you need to be which full moon? Equinox and solstice, every 6 months these things happen, right? It was a summer solstice or winter solstice and so on. Happens the periodicity of so much. Sunrise and sunset over the same constellation. If I say that sunrise happened when Kritika Nakshatra was right there, that, or let's say Capricorn was over there, then the question is, how often does it happen? Once in a year. Once in a year. Then the cycles, before that, lunar solar eclipse. Even these things have got predictable periodicity from months to years. If I say that a certain eclipse happened during that time, that also can be dated with some regularity. Cycles of Mercury and Venus, even that in periodicity of days. Then Mars, Jupiter, Saturn cycles are much slower, but again you have periodicity in years over here. You might refer to comets or meteor showers. Now these are also predictable, but from few years to thousands of years, you have these things. Then things like transits and occultations, what are that? Transit is when sun is over there and Mercury goes across the face of the sun, or Venus goes across the face, that's called a transit. Occultation is, for example, when the moon is going and Aldebaran, Rohini is over there, and moon covers Rohini and goes over. You see what I'm saying? That's an occultation. So even these things happen and are noticed by people, but in periodicity of months to years. Finally, there's a phenomenon called precession that I talked about in my earlier talks. This is the one where what we are pointing to Polaris right now, not my hand figuratively, but the Earth is tilted at 23.5 degrees. And because of the Earth's tilt, where it's rotating about this tilted point, right? So it's rotating from west to east, so all the heavenly bodies appear to be going from east to west. But the point where it is tilted at, that appears to be stationary in the sky. That's not moving. Everything else seems to be going around because of a rotation like this. Can you visualize this? Because of rotating like this is going around. But that guy over there is constant. That's Polaris. Where we are pointing to is not constant in the sky because the Earth has got an additional degree of motion. That's called precession. I'll talk about this in a slide a little later. This is like you're spinning a top. As a child, you played with a top. You're spinning a top. The top goes at full speed over here, but sometimes a slow wobble, right? That slow wobble is what our Earth is doing. And that slow wobble has got a time period of 25,771 years. And so this precision is also a phenomenon. Because of precision, certain datings can be done with high precision. You can just go there and say, this is when it happened. And we are in a fortunate situation because most of our astronomical observations make references to events which can be dated with this bedrock. So we are, compared to other civilizations, we are very fortunate because we have maintained all these data points in astronomy. The observable effects of precision on nakshatras, this happens every 960 years. If I say that a certain nakshatra was at a certain point, because of precision, that is only true for 1000 years. After 1000 years, it's no longer true. So Valmiki says that Kritika nakshatra was in a certain place. But today, say, wait a minute, that time of the year, Kritika is not there, it's over there. I can estimate back in time and say, yeah, that was written about 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago, when that was true. That's how we use these clocks. So there's something called Milankovitch cycle that is not relevant for our talk just yet, but it impacts the nature of the studies that we do. In Milankovitch cycle, we know the Earth does three things. He did not discover this. It was already known. He only found an observation where he said that because of Milankovitch cycle, the ice ages, the warming up records of the Earth happen, and climate change happens on Earth, and so on and so forth. So the first cycle is a 1,100,000 year cycle where the Earth's orbit goes from elliptical to circular, So this one happens to the cycle of 100,000 years. The second one is a tilt. The tilt that I said from 23.5 degrees, it goes to 21 to 23, to 24.4. This happens in a cycle of 41,000 years. Finally, this wobble that I talked about, 25,771 years, the precision. Because of these effects, various things happen, and for us as archaeo-astronomers, this is critical. This is also important, but this is very, very critical. We can date events precisely in a period of one precision.
What happens to weather patterns in 100,000 years?
Yes. So this is linked to weather. It is linked to when ice ages happen, global warming happens and everything because of these effects. Because the amount of radiant energy from the sun changes in each of these patterns. It does not change the season. The seasons can get worse or milder. The seasons will still happen because that's Earth's revolution, but it still happen as usual, but it gets accentuated. That is the point. So nakshatra, I talked about this a lot in the past. The division of the sky in 13 and 1/3 degree segments, there are 27 of them. So here are some of the nakshatras over here from Kritika, Mrigashira, Pushya, Magha, and so on. The whole lot of them. Rashis are divisions of the sky in 30 degree segments. So there are the very familiar Rashis that you see over here, Kanya, Thula, Rishika, Dhanush, and so on. There are 30 Rashis. These straddle each other in a certain way. So we say Chaitra Masa. Chaitra Masa is now going to be straddling the Chitra Nakshatra. When the full moon is in Chitra Nakshatra, basically that particular month is called the Chaitra month. It straddles two nakshatras, as you can see, Vishaka as well as this one. And for us, Ramanavami happens in the Chaitra Masa, so we know that. Yeah. So that's very important for us to know something like that. So let me move on from that. Here are a list of all the nakshatras. Each of these nakshatras in the Vedanga Jyotisha, in the Surya Siddhanta, and the principal star. Like I said, when our ancients divided the sky, they said that I'll divide from the horizon to there as the first nakshatra. And I'll identify that nakshatra by a principal star over there. See that bright star? That's the star I'll use for identification. So by looking at it, I'll know which nakshatra it is. So they used, in this case, Eta Tauri. The Rohini Nakshatra is Alpha Tauri. And so on, all the way down to Revati, my star in Zeta Pisces, and so on. So there are a whole lot of stars that we know. And this correspondence happened during the colonial times. The British came to learn about Indian astronomy. They went to the Pandits and asked them, okay, where is that one? They said, that is Revati. Oh, okay, that's Zeta Pisces. Zeta Pisces. That's how this correspondence was done, just in case you're wondering. Okay, I'd like to now talk a little bit about the night sky. I'm not very sure how clear these things are to you. But today's sky, June 11, 2017, this is the ground line. It's not very clear, but this is north, west is over here, and east is over here, and south is towards you. Think the south is towards you. Whenever the moon appears on the eastern horizon, when it rises, which section of the sky is it in? That section of the sky corresponds to nakshatra. That defines a nakshatra for that day. Okay, that's how we define the nakshatra for the day. Where is the moon? It appears in the eastern horizon. In this case, it is Uttara Ashada. So if you have Google, you can go and see today's nakshatra. By 22 hours today, by 22 hours it might go to that. So, yeah, see Purva Ashada over here. So there's a little difference. I think by the time it transits 22 hours tonight, it might go to the next nakshatra. So that is the Purva Ashada is right over here. So that's one thing to know. Second thing I'd like you to note is this chapter called Polaris. If it's clear from back there, you'll see concentric circles over here. So this is where the Earth is pointing to in its tilt. Remember I said it's tilted at an axis? That place where it is pointing to is Polaris. It appears to be immobile in the sky. Everything else seems to be going from east to west. It's going in circles. Smaller circles here, bigger circles here, bigger circles here, and so on. Okay? The sun is over here today. But the sun goes northward in something called Uttarayana. Right? Uttarayana, Dakshinayana. The journey towards the north, journey towards the south. So it is going to reach its northernmost point called summer solstice on the 20th of this month. Okay? At that point it will be approximately 23.5 degrees. That's where it's reaching one of the tropics over there, Tropic Cancer, Tropic Capricorn, two of them. It will reach that point. Then it will go to southernmost journey over here. When it goes to the southernmost journey, is going to cross this line over here. This line is called the celestial equator. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see this line across the back there? You can see a little in the curved line. That's the 0 degrees. How we do these things is, we take Earth's longitudes and latitudes and project them to the sky. Okay? Earth's latitudes and longitudes projected to the sky become celestial coordinates. So Earth's coordinates become celestial coordinates. Earth's equator becomes celestial equator. So when the sun crosses the celestial equator, that is the date of the equinox. That is the date of the equinox. So right now the northernmost journey will reach until this point. Then we'll go to southernmost journey to reach the southernmost point in 6 months' time from now. So whenever it crosses the equator, that is the date of the equinox, critically important for us, because at that point it might be at a certain nakshatra. Some rishi might have said on the date of the equinox it was on that nakshatra. And because of precision, that is always changing, the nakshatra is changing. So I can work backwards in time and said, if that rishi said that is the New Year's nakshatra, when was it last true? Remember, for us, New Year would have started with either maybe the Dakshinayana or Uttarayana. That would have been the start of the New Year. So they have referred to it in those terms. Okay, that's all I wanted to tell you. Also, I want to tell you one more thing. See the star called Abhijit? That's pretty far away. It's called Vedam. During this precession cycle, Earth starts from here and goes up to Abhijit. So there was a period of time when Abhijit was the pole star. That is around almost 12,000 years before, 12,000 to 13,000 years before, it was pointing at Abhijit. It's called Brahma Rishi. In fact, I will talk about that and go to Ramayana. So it is referring to Abhijit as a pole star. It is not Polaris. In today's time, it is Polaris. So in 15,000 years from now, once again we are pointing to Abhijit, because it's a cycle. We can't stop the Earth from doing its wobble. It's going to keep wobbling. Alright, that's all I wanted to say about that. So having with that background, Archaeo-Astronomy, I am now going to examine the works of 3 researchers. And these researchers are Pushkar Bhatnagar, Dr. P.V. Vartak, and my good Facebook friend, I hope he's watching, Nilesh Nilakant Oak. So we're going to talk about their works. and I'll examine the internal evidence. By internal evidence, I mean these are all people who are the Indic tradition. They are all Sanskrit scholars. They're all able to go to the original Valmiki Ramayana. They're able to look at the verses. They're able to interpret it, and based on that interpretation and archaeological, astronomical phenomena, they're able to use their mathematical knowledge and their senses to estimate the date for that. All of them are very well grounded in the Indic tradition. So we will try to critically see what is it that they are saying, and I won't have the time to do all of those things, obviously. But as a scientist, I'm unbiased now. Just because Nilesh is my buddy, good friend, I'm not going to say Nilesh work is what is going to work. So I'm going to now objectively look at all of the works and say what metrics do we use to evaluate. I'm saying that claims for estimating the time period of Ramayana should show maximum fitting of the astronomical data points from Valmiki Ramayana. Valmiki Ramayana has got hundreds of data points, hundreds of astronomical data points. So if you claim that I know the time period of Ramayana, then you should be able to fit those data points. If you cannot fit those data points, we have a problem. Okay? That is the issue. So I'm saying it is necessary to fit the sequence of primary events at least. And what are the primary events? The primary events are Rama's birth. I'm going to use that as an anchor date. If you tell me that I can estimate Rama's birth, I'll start with that anchor date. I know 16 years passed, and then he went into exile, marriage with Rama, then after our marriage 12 years, then he went to Yuga, then he came back. You see, that's a sequence of events. So we use Rama's birth, Sita Kalyana, Rama's voluntarily exiled from Ayodhya, Hanuman's flight to Lanka, war between Rama and Ravana in Lanka, and the return to Ayodhya. So these are all the events that we will expect any archaeo-astronomer to be able to explain using their theories. So this is the common test for all the three works. What is the birth of Rama? Our source for the birth of Rama obviously is Valmiki Ramayana. And there in book 1, Balakanda, Sarga 18, verses 8, 9, 10, 11. Here is the English transliteration of that one. I used valmikiramayana.net for my translation. There are several phenomena here. Do you see that it says that on completion of which all the highlighted one, 12th month, 9th day of the Chaitra Masa, ruling star of the day is Punarvashu, and 5 of the 9 planets, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus are the highest positions. Jupiter and Moon is ascendant in Cancer. Of course, they didn't use these words, but the point is, am I running out of time? Okay, let me quickly finish. I'm using the word highest to mean exaltation, and exaltation means something for the astrologers of today who use these terms, and this is what they mean. Sun is in Aries, Moon is in Taurus, Mercury is in Virgos, Venus in Pisces, and so on. There's some certain known positions when we claim that these were at the highest positions. So Bhatnagar used planetarium software called Planetarium Gold, and he attempted to find a consistent sequence of events in Ramayana. And his book is this one, Dating the Era of Lord Ram. This is his book. And I used this particular thing as well as this YouTube video. And here are the data points. And my simulation, I'm not going to go into any great detail over here, but I simulated the exact points that Bhatnagar is proposing using my software. I use an independent software. I didn't use Planetarium Gold. I used Stellarium because we want to independently evaluate what they said. So I went ahead and simulated these things, and for this date, January 10th, 5114 BCE, that is the date that Pushkar Bhatnagar is proposing for the birth of Bhagwan. Okay, so if you go with that date, are the positions of Mars, Moon, Venus, Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn, are they where they should be according to Valmiki Ramayana? That is what we are after. Okay, because if that is there, then it's all right. This passes the test. So anyway, I put down the dates, I've put down the positions, I'll just move on. I also simulated that with the nakshatra model. The previous one is with the constellation, Western constellation model, and this is with our nakshatra model. And here are the dates in Bhatnagar. Based upon this date, he proposes all of these. I will not read any of these things. So here is my table. Valmiki Ramayana says the nakshatra is Punarvashu. From Bhatnagar, the nakshatra unfortunately is Dhanushta. It's not Punarvashu. He says Jupiter should be in Karkat, which is Cancer. Yes, it is in Cancer. Moon should be in Cancer, but unfortunately the Moon is in Makara, which is Capricorn. Sun in Aries, but Sun is in Pisces. Venus in Pisces, but is in Aquarius. Similarly, Jupiter should be in Cancer, that's the correct one. Saturn in Libra, that is correct.
Pretty close, 2 days only difference. Purvashada, Uttarashada, Dhanishada.
Yes, as far as the nakshatra is concerned.
Yeah, 3 days.
As far as the nakshatra is concerned, but the planets move more slowly. So even that should match. So this does not completely match. Let's not draw a verdict from what I'm saying. I only use a very hard data point. The hard data point is Rama's birth. Can they predict it? If they predict it, then other things will follow. So I'll show you later on that why such a test is not the best of tests to use also. So anyway, I use stellarium to independently verify. Dr. P.V. Vartak fixes the date to 4th December 7323 BCE. He also uses these positions, Jupiter in Cancer, Saturn in Libra, Mars in Capricorn, and so on and so forth. He is able to get a very good compilation of facts based upon his dating methods. So I simulated his methods also to find out where is Jupiter, Jupiter is in Gemini, where is the Moon, where is Mars, Venus, the Sun, and Saturn. And based on these things, can we draw a conclusion, independent verification of his claims to see where they are. For one data point only, mind you, just for one data point. So, Dr. Vartak's work, the nakshatras Punarvashu, that comes out correctly, but Jupiter and Moon are not in Cancer, they're in Gemini. Venus is in Pisces. But what I want to point out is Jupiter, he said, should be in Valmiki Ramayana is in Cancer, but here is in Gemini, just a little away from Cancer. So the very next one will be Cancer. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So again, it's too detailed, so I don't want to get into all of that. Right? So, but if you see, even in the previous comparison you made as well as these, you have to look at the major planets.
Yes.
Okay. Saturn, which takes 2.5 years in a sign. Jupiter takes 1 year in a sign. So some of the other smaller planets like Venus and Mercury are only 21 days in a sign. And that too, the conclusion you reach, they are only in adjoining signs.
Yes.
They are not moved by 2 or 3 signs.
Yes.
So then
They are close.
So which Ayanamsha did you use?
That's a very good question. I have not done that. I have blindly went and simulated it in stellarium and said, let me use stellarium and say, what does stellarium say?
So when you use the default Ayanamsha, you can try Rahali and
Like
others and see which one is.
Yes, I completely agree. So I have not used a traditional lens here. I have used Western available stellarium, which uses the VSOP 87 planetary model. I'll talk about it a little later, and I've used that. You are absolutely right. What are the methods that you're using? What are the tools that you use? These gentlemen are experts, much better than me in understanding all of these, obviously. And they have come up with these models by using the traditional methods. I'm not sure Dr. P. Vartak had a planetarium software. He's sitting in Pune, and for the last so many years, he's using traditional methods to compute everything that he's doing. Whereas Bhatnagar had planetarium gold, and Nilesh Oak had Voyager. So they used software, but I'm sure that Dr. Vartak used traditional methods to compute. But the point I'm trying to make out is, does that estimation work? What is the date they have proposed, and does it pass the test that I'm doing blind to the method they've used? Completely blind, I'm just saying, does it pass, does it fail? I'll show later on it's not a good way of doing things. Nilesh, his observation, this is the book that he wrote, The Historic Rama. He proposes the date of 29th November 12,240 BCE. Okay, so pretty ancient time frame, and he says that's the birth of Rama. He also identifies the pole star Brahma Rishi. He refers to that Yuga Kanda of 4.48 Abhijit, and he uses Voyager 4.5 to do it. How am I on the time, guys? I mean, so I'm going faster than normal because I'm mindful of the time only. So
still 30 minutes.
Okay. So once again, I simulated whatever Nilesh ji has proposed in his book, and tried to see where are the planetary positions as far as November 29th, 240 BC is concerned. And I have used the one previous date, as Nilesh ji can see, hopefully, because stellarium has got -1 associated with the timings. So I've tried to simulate it as well as I can, and I get a bunch of results over here. And these results are close, but they don't match. They don't match exactly as far as Rama's birthday is concerned. So here's a recap of the works by the 3 researchers. We took 3 researchers, we took the works that they have proposed publicly, and we took an independent software like stellarium. We said, let's use just one data point, Rama's birth. and for our golden reference, we use Valmiki Ramayana. When Valmiki Ramayana said this is the positions according to ValmikiRamayana.net, which translated it. Hopefully he translated it correctly, because I'm not a Sanskrit scholar. Later on I'll ask Bharatji to help me with that. So I use those data points and try to say, do they pass a test or what happens? Now, I started with a necessary condition. I call it a necessary condition, that if you want to tell me the date of Ramayana, you better pass this necessary. It's a hard test that I myself imposed to fit the sequence of primary events, that Rama's birth, Kalyanam, voluntary exile, Hanuman's flight, war, and so on. We observed that none of the researchers fit the first data point. None of them fit it. However, I want to caution, don't take away the wrong message. Okay? Don't take away the wrong message. By assuming, back calculating the first data point, which does not fit tradition, each researcher was able to fit other datable phenomena to varying extents. Ramayana has got hundreds of data points. The question is, how many data points is your theory able to fit? Some researchers fit 5 data points, some researchers fit 50 data points, some researchers fit 200 data points. You see what I'm getting at? So in doing so, they had to sacrifice something. I can't fit the birthday of Rama, unfortunately. But all other phenomena in Ramayana seems to be fitting over here. So not a question of interpretation. So what I'm saying is, as a mathematician, if you give me n data points and you use different criterion functions to do curve fitting. Curve fitting is something mathematicians do. If you got 10 data points, you fit a curve, you use a mathematical thing called curve fitting criteria. You solve that the computer will fit a curve for you. Right? There are many, many different curves depending on what criteria you use. Most people use least squares, so just one such criteria. But the point is, when you're using curve fitting, you're not going to fit every data point exactly. That's not going to happen, because they're all data points have noise in it.
There will be outliers.
Outliers will be outliers. So that is the sense in which we need to take these results. So we should applaud every researcher's effort to explain astronomy phenomena in the Ramayana, and their work greatly helps us by having opened research doors, especially to people like me who are not at all at the level of depth that they have gone to. It helps me to come in, understand the concepts, and more. That's very, very good thing that they've started. So, what are the other astronomy datable phenomena? Valmiki Ramayana's references to nakshatras at key events. The season descriptions at key events. There's also a season. As Rama is going through the forest, what is he seeing? What is the botany that he's seeing? What is the season that is it? A cold season, hot season, spring, rainy season, and so on. Comet sightings. There are also comet sightings in Ramayana. There is also eclipse information. So right now I took the toughest test, the date of Rama's birth, for exact correspondence with the text. And I'm saying that test is a wrong test. Should modify that metric for consistency and robustness of theory. Instead of asking which theory exactly fits all the data, we must now step back and say, I would like to see who is able to maximally explain all the data points in the Ramayana. That should be our test. It should not be a test of, let me fit every data point there is and it's an exact science. That's not going to happen. So I observed that Nilakant O,
Based on our current expertise and knowledge.
based on exactly, yes, you're absolutely right, because there's so much to this in interpretation. Have I interpreted it correctly? Because people who write the Sanskrit text, there are so many metaphors they've used. They might not have named a planet directly, but a metaphor to the planet. So is that metaphor correct? Have I interpreted it correctly? There's so many layers over here, so we need to be very careful. So Nileshji has gone and also looked at the seasons, for example. I just took one data point. He's fitted it to nakshatra, he's fitted it to comets, he's fitted it to a lot of things. In this case, the seasons, he's able to get 200 plus references to seasons in the Ramayana, validated with this theory of 12,240 BC, which is much more than what other researchers have been able to do. And here's a description in Ramayana, what are the seasons from Sharad to Varsha to Vasanta and so on. And what is he able to fit it to, whether it fits it or not. Some of them are no, as you can see, some of them are yes, as you can see over here. He's able to fit that. So being able to fit many data points is a sign of a robust theory. So the kind of metrics we use is critical over here. So what is my discussion on Archaeo-Astronomy? I'm nearly at the end, guys, so I have one more section to go and I'm done. We need to ask the questions, are the texts accurate? are they free of inconsistent interpolations? Because these texts were oral transmission for a long period of time, then written down, then various people copied it down in various places. Did they add in something? Did somebody add in something somewhere, change something from that to something else? That's the noise which enters the system, right? But only a critical addition might help. Yes, sir, please.
Yeah, I think Balakanda and from which you are also taken at a point,
Yes.
as well as
Uttarakhand.
Uttarakhanda is commonly considered by many of the scholars as interpolations,
Yes.
but not from the
Not, yes, exactly, exactly. But I'm referring to even beyond that, even within Balakanda, within Uttarakhanda, Ayodhya, are there references that might have been changed over the period of time? Because we have been having this for such a long period of time, there's every chance. Are the translations accurate? Somebody might have translated a key verse in one way versus another. Are the interpretations accurate? You might translate it correctly, but the interpretation could be wrong. Is that accurate? Even if some phenomena do not fit, to a majority of readable phenomena fit, are the fitted points consistent with the narrative? It's got to be consistent. I cannot say, yes, I fit all the points in Ramayana, except that I have a 2,000-year gap between exile and Ayodhya. Right? That's not going to happen. It should be consistent with the time frame that Valmiki has said. In 7 days, they should have constructed Ram Setu. That's what he says there. You have to try and fit it to 7 days, you should construct Ram Setu. Same thing with several other things. 14 years only exile. Exile can't become 140 years. So that's a consistency. I'm saying.
What do you do with this shloka? Dashavarsa Sahasrani, Dashavarsa Shatani cha. Ramo Rajyam, he did Rajyam for 10,000 odd years.
Yes.
So how do you resolve all this stuff?
Let's not go there. not. So point is clearly this area is promising, but lot more work is needed. It is not an open shut case. There are many researchers who have written books on it. They are not the final word yet. We should read these books, understand their arguments, where they're coming from. It's certainly, that's why in the beginning I said we should not be arrogant to assume that, yeah, I got it. No. We are only trying to estimate. We are trying to estimate and trying to see, is it consistent with the so-called rational arguments that are coming in. So the planetarium software uses a module called VSOP 87. This VSOP 87 is something that's developed, I'm not very sure where, maybe France or somewhere like that. And people have been using this since 1990s or so, or maybe even later, 2000s or so. And it has got its limitations because these use mathematical models to project the movements of planets. Unfortunately for us, the planet revolutions and so on are not deterministic. They are all chaotic. These are mathematical terms that I'm using. Chaos is something that might enter your system because you have not represented it sufficiently in physical detail. Because you missed out on physical details, there appears to be some random noise in the way this planet happens. Because we can't capture it in mathematical models, these models will give errors. And where do they give errors? Mostly in the fast planets. In Mercury, in Venus, the errors will be very good. In Saturn and Jupiter, much less, because much more robust. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's limited accuracy. Stellar positions are accurate over thousands of years, no problem. If I say Kritika Nakshatra, that is very accurate. For thousands of years, that model is right. But the planetary positions are only limited to 10,000 BCE to 10,000 current era. That's the accuracy range of that model. It's not as if it's 100% accurate as the entire range. It means don't use it beyond that. The results are not predictable. Mathematically, we can't use this module for it. So what have we done? Our model now, Treta Yuga continues to be our upper bound, but in our lower bound, we have got three contenders, 5114 BCE, 7323 BCE, and 12240 BCE at the time of Ramayana. One last module and I'm done. Okay? So I'd like to look at other evidences for Ramayana. Primarily, I'd like to look at botany and ice age records that will allow us to resolve some of these things a little further. There are a lot of glacial and interglacial cycles over the last 450,000 years. We need to concentrate over here in this time frame. So here we had a major interglacial period over here, ending somewhere about 75,000 years ago. Then this minor one started. So this minor one persisted until from 50,000 years until about 7,000 BCE or 5,000 BCE, until around that time frame. And now here's where we are. So there's a lot of botany in Ramayana. There's a lot of botany in Ramayana. So luckily for us, there are some researchers who have gone in and have done a deep study of the botany, And there is I was very pleasantly surprised to see Wikipedia carrying an exhaustive list. So here is the reference for that one. It carries a list of plants A to L and L to Z in Ramayana, complete list of them, and this is the way it is given: botanical name, Indian name, the epic it appears in, which sarga, which sloka, which location, the picture of the plant. It's a beautiful catalog. So grab it before Wikipedia decides to take it away. So get this data and keep it somewhere. So it's an amazing, and these are the researchers I think who work, Amritalingam and Sudhakar and Chennai.
Yes, Chennai.
Yes, okay. Now I'd like to go from botany to Ice Age. Okay. To start with the Ice Age discussion, I'd first like to talk about a place called Doggerland. Don't go looking for it in a map because you won't find Doggerland on a map, but it is there in the geological name. And this Doggerland is in the North Sea. You might recognize United Kingdom here, right? So in 16,000 BCE, there was no United Kingdom like this. The land was this entire thing that you see. Because there's so much of water locked up in ice. Ice Age was still on. Water was locked up in ice. So these things are all above the ground level. So there's a National Geographic about in 2012, which came with an article on Doggerland with pictures of archaeological finds from the seabed. Today it's under 400 feet of water. Let's allow that for a minute to sink in. 400 feet of water today. And they found settlements at the bottom. They found human villages and they found artifacts and everything 400 years ago. So this was 16,000 BCE when the sea levels are 400 feet lower than today. So this set me thinking, if Ram Setu could have been constructed, when is a good time frame for that to have happened in relation with the Ice Age records? Right? In relation to Ice Age records, when might that happen? So it was an interesting question for me to pose, and that's the angle I'm taking over here. So,
in the end of Treta Yuga, sea raised, Madura went down.
Yes. So here you find, I try to find information related to Asia rather than North Sea, because North Sea is there and we are closer to the equator, we have any data over here. Luckily for me, I found information on Sunda. Sunda Shelf is where current Indonesia is. You might recognize Sumatra, Java, Borneo and other such places. So I got information on this from a US Geological Survey that maintains historical maps. And what we see here is 14.3 thousand years before present, that is around the time frame that Neeraj Neelakanthrope is proposing, 12,280 BCE. This was the extent of land. It was the water level was 90 meters below the present sea level in Indonesia. 90 meters below in the time frame that Neeraj is proposing for Ramayana. Okay? And basically, if you look at this elevation over here, you see this orange. All this was land. This blue is where the water is. Up to this green and this orange and yellow, all this was land at that time. And Sumatra is over here, today's Sumatra. If you go to Vartak's time frame, which is 7,200 BCE, the sea level was 15 meters below the present sea level. Just in 2,000 years. 2,000 years, the water had melted so. Remember, I told you that glacier from 50,000 BCE is coming down. By that time, 15 meters is over here. All this yellow is land, this blue is all the water in Sumatra. Then if you go to the time frame of Bhatnagar, which is 5,200 BCE, you see that it is 5 meters below the present sea level. 5 meters below present sea level. So this is the land that you see over here. So that begs the question, right? Begs the question. For each of these researchers, what would have been the status between India and Sri Lanka? What would have been the water level? What would have been the land level? And could an ancient army have been able to construct a bridge and go across? Let's now remove the Indic perspective. Let's put the Indic perspective, meaning that I'm an outsider to the tradition and I know that one person can lay so many bricks in a day and other things. Now, Valmiki Ramayana says 7 days. 7 days it was constructed, whole thing was constructed. So the current depth is around 10 meters, these waters around Ram Setu. And apparently the Ram Setu land bridge was used until 1400s. In 1400 there was a tsunami there and it broke away portions of it. It's not usable since then. Till then it was usable. In 5200 BCE there would have been 5 meters of water in this area. Prior to 7200 BCE there have been a land bridge visible all the way through. There have been a land bridge all the way through have been visible based on Ice Age records. So Dr. P.V. Vartak, as well as D.H. Nilakant Oak's time frame, there is no water there. There is just land bridge. Maybe puddles of water, maybe shallow water stuff, just like there's let's assume there's a higher elevation and a depression over there. Water will be stuck over there, right? You appreciate what I'm saying? Although the sea level is much lower, water can be locked up in a higher level elevation. So maybe there are small periods where there's water. So and the final slide over here, closing remarks. So the textbook date of 100 to 500 BC for Ramayana is completely incorrect. It is outdated. Archaeological evidence in Sindhu Saraswati shows settlements as old as 9,000 years. We know that. I don't need to impress anybody here about it. The traditional date cannot be used as yet because at least 2 Yuga models are there, and we don't have the tools to go back so far. We don't have the archaeological tools or scientific tools to go back to that time frame.
Yeah,
so we can't.
24 Treta Yugas and the 4 Yugas.
Yes, we can't yet use those. So we'll just keep the data point there. The ancient Upanishads and Vedas are citing the Ramayana. So that's one indicator for us from citation record that yes, we have ways of dating the Ramayana. Archaeo-Astronomy holds the greatest promise in my perspective. 3 dates were discussed for the birth of Rama, and these are the dates over here. I talked just one slide on botanical knowledge in Ramayana, clearly shows a pan-India knowledge. The botanical knowledge in Ramayana doesn't just talk about botany in southern India. It starts from the north and goes all the way to Lanka, which means intimate knowledge of geography is present in Valmiki Ramayana, in contradiction to what the leftists said that it is a text that seems to know only Mahajanapada area. That is the conclusion.
Invasion of Arya over Dravidians.
Yes. Yes. So it addresses some critiques that were made in 1974 that they're all not okay. The Ice Age records shows very shallow seas around Park Strait, enabling the construction of a bridge, perhaps only small segments, or maybe expansion. Maybe the Vanara army wanted to go and there was not a very big enough. So maybe they patched up some places in the bridge. Patched up some places, that was done in 70s. So it is maybe the creative license where they constructed the entire bridge. In the first day they did so many yojanas, second day they did so many yojanas, third day they did so many yojanas. There's a text in Valmiki Ramayana that says that. So we have to now look at it, Ice Age record. If we are going to scratch our heads rationally, want to think what can I do here, then maybe we think it is entirely land bridge with some water, shallow waters here and there. Maybe a simple army could have constructed that in 7 days because mostly the bridge was there. It was in places that had to strengthen it for the army to go. Of course, they didn't have tanks those days, but they had people walking over there. All right. So thank you very much.
Fantastic research. I think most people would have been enjoying the Facebook Live. This is enormous amount of work what Raj Vedam has here done. I don't have words to explain. In the way that Dr. Bharat has started, the fantastic way of understanding Ramayana, human, Deva, Bhagavan, Paramatman, in the way you kind of put it in a different lens of scientific, this is fantastic. Questions?